trust me, I get it. You're feeling the pressure to keep your faith separate from your work, worried that pursuing your God-given dreams might be seen as selfish or misguided. For far too long, we've been held back by a world that tells us that faith and ambition don't mix, that our divinely inspired visions are just wishful thinking. But here's what I've discovered. Our faith isn't a liability in our leadership. As a matter of fact, it's the source of our strength and wisdom. When we fully integrate our leadership with our Christian values, then and only then do we tap into that unshakable divine power. The real challenge is navigating how to boldly pursue our purpose while staying anchored in our faith. And that's exactly what the Beacon Show is all about. Each week, we bring you biblical wisdom and practical strategies from true beacons, Christian leaders who are illuminating the world. And it's also that you can let your light shine brighter and brighter. I'm Tamara Jackson, and this is The Beacon Show. As a leader, there are times when your plate is so full, your to-do list so long, that the mere thought of stepping away feels impossible. But what if pressing pause is exactly what you need to gain the clarity and motivation to take your mission to the next level? Today's guest is no stranger to the demands of leadership, but he's learned the power of what I call strategic disengagement. Josh Forti is an entrepreneur, podcast host, and online marketing expert who's generated over 20 million in revenue, grown an audience of over 10 million on Instagram, and whose podcast has had over 1.5 million downloads. But beyond the impressive numbers, Josh is a man who's walked through the refining fire of adversity, from losing his brother in a tragic accident to watching his business crumble beneath him. Josh has faced his share of dark nights of the soul. In those moments, Josh had to confront the parts of his identity that were wrapped up in external accomplishments and learn to ground his worth in Christ alone. Through inner work and wise counsel, he emerged with a renewed focus and faith, ready to rebuild in alignment with God's calling on his life. Now, Josh uses his platform to help equip other entrepreneurs to pursue God-given success without losing themselves in the process. With vulnerability and conviction, he shares lessons learned about the power of a strong identity, the freedom found in simplicity, and the importance of making room for rest and reflection. In this honest conversation, Josh pulls back the curtain on his own journey of unlearning hustle culture, creating healthy rhythms, and keeping the main thing the main thing. Whether you're feeling the weight of leadership, battling burnout, or simply sensing God inviting you to step back and reevaluate, Josh's story will embolden you to embrace the power of pause. Get ready for a perspective-shifting dialogue on what it means to build a life and business that honors your truest priorities, even if that means doing less to ultimately achieve more. Enjoy. Josh, welcome to the Beacon Show. Super excited to have this conversation with you. We've been catching up a little bit in advance of getting into the official interview, and just getting to know you has been a pleasure. Learning a little bit more about your journey has been inspiring. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today and helping those that are looking to accomplish some of the success that you've achieved follow in your footsteps. So thank you for taking the time to be on the show with us today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I always say, a lot of people ask me to be on a lot of different podcasts, and I always say, if you try to get me to come on and talk about marketing, like, you're gonna have a hard time because there's too many. But if you bring Jesus into the equation, right? Like, I am in, right? We can talk Jesus and marketing. That's great. But I appreciate your vocalness about him and just your faith. So I'm excited. It'll be good.
Yeah, this is going to be great, because in kind of doing my research and exploring your social media and so forth, I see that you are really into making Jesus known. I think that's how you've been putting it. And this has been a journey for you.
Yeah.
You're in the midst of kind of pivoting your whole business and focusing on completely different things than you were at one point. But before we get to that, I'd really love to know, since you've even acknowledged how important Jesus is, talk to me a little bit about what your life was like before Jesus, BC.
Yeah, for sure. So just a quick context for the listeners who have never heard of me before. My name is Josh Forti, obviously, like you said. I've been in the digital marketing, social media, online sales space for, well, I guess it'll be 8 years now. Holy cow, coming up here next month. And so my background in social media, tens of millions of followers, or about 10 million followers that we grew, lots of revenue and stuff online. God got a hold of my life again about 13 months ago. And we'll talk about the BC thing, but I serve King Jesus, right? Like the King Jesus, right? The all powerful, almighty, the ruler of it all, right? And that guy. And so like a lot of my perspective and a lot of what I do is I think that Christians, I know I did, growing up as well, is like we have a very skewed version of who Jesus really is, right? And so like I believe he's a powerful entity and that we need to make him known, right? And so everything that I do, whether it comes to sales or business and marketing, while I don't call myself a Christian company, my personal brand goal is to make him known there. So that's just a little context on that. It's interesting. You said, what was life like before Christ? I grew up in a Christian household, right? I mean, I was going to church ever since I can remember, right? Like certainly grew up in the church. When we moved across the country, the reason that my parents are, at where they're at today in Indiana is like we were in an RV driving across the country. Like my parents sold everything and left California when I was 10 years old, right? And drove across country, not knowing where they were going to go. And they found a church, and like they're still at that church to this day in Indiana, right? So like church, God, very much been a part of my life for most of it. And I just remember when I was, 18, 19 years old, I was homeschooled, right? Very small town, grew up on a farm out there in Indiana, that like the church and religion just sucked, right? Like it like was this thing that like you had to follow all these rules and you couldn't ask questions. And I don't think that that was their intention, right?
Yeah.
I know that wasn't my parents' intention, right? But like to me, God, I didn't grow up with money. I didn't grow up. I mean, I grew up where money was always the issue, right? There was always we made every decision due to lack of money. And so like my dad was gone a lot, just working, trying to provide for the family. And I just felt like when I finally had a taste of freedom post high school, right? I was like, God,
you're wilding out.
I don't need you, right? I'm going to go make some money. I'm going to go have some success, and I'll come back to you when I'm ready.
Yeah.
Right. And so the craziness of it all is, I mean, I never didn't acknowledge, I never said, oh, God isn't real, or I don't believe in him, or right. It was just, I simply put him on the back burner because I didn't understand who he was. I didn't have a real relationship with him, right? I mean, I accepted Christ when I was like 8, right? But like I didn't know what that meant, right? And so I went off and got into the entrepreneurship world, and entrepreneurship became my religion, right? The idea of hustle and the idea of money and success and fame, and it was like that became like my entire focus on it. I left the church, and for good reason, right? There were some definite things where I'm like, you guys suck, right? I'd ask questions. I was told I was going to hell because I got a tattoo, right? Like, oh, like,
well, yeah, I've heard that.
All right, like what, or asking a question about. So, that I think that was my experience, or that kind of led me to leaving, if you will, or just putting them on the back burner. And I will say, like, I think for a time, money and entrepreneurship and fame can be really fun, right? And it can be, all obsessing. And I hated my life, or not. I didn't hate my life. I had a good childhood. I don't want to make it sound like it was awful, but like I grew up in a very small world with not a lot of opportunity, right? So I didn't like I was broke. I didn't have any money before God, or when I was with God. And then afterwards I was like, well, I'm just going to work and get my way out of this. And then, you know what I'm saying? So when I got into entrepreneurship, it took me a few years, and I hustled and I grinded. I mean, it sucked, right? But then I started making some money, and I'm like, oh, this is great, right? Like now I have freedom, and now I have money, and everything that I've been doing in my life has just been driven to be free. I want to be free. I want to be able to be my own boss and do my own thing. And so, I don't know how deep or detailed you want to go, but, definitely cycled. I grew up in Instagram boom, 7 million followers originally, got up to 10 million followers that we grew on social media for client, not my own. I had about 100,000, but like, millions for that, dealing with large sums of money. I definitely dealt with more than I made, right? I didn't make that much, but way, way more. You give a kid that was making $25,000 on a farm, $300,000 or $500,000, and all of a sudden it's like, that's
That's a lot of
money, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so just dumb, stupid, right? With it. But just very, very driven. And that was kind of life. That was kind of like life before. I think there was two phases of God getting back to me. Like one is where I came back to God, and then one was where I came back to Jesus. And Jesus was 13 months ago, and God was before that. And I don't know if we want to pause there, if you want me to keep going, but yeah, that's a little bit of context on that.
Yeah. Actually, interestingly enough, we have some things in common. I acknowledged Christ at 9, so you beat me by a year, it sounds like. But I can identify with what you're sharing here. You know, when you're growing up in the church, at least for me, and it sounds like it was similar for you, right? It was motivated by not wanting to go to hell or
100%
outcast, right? But you don't really know what you're saying or why you're saying it. You just know that you want to be saved. You want to experience this good life. You don't want to be left out, right? And so I could identify with that experience of growing up in that space, and then, getting that taste of freedom and taking full advantage of it. And so where did that take you? I mean, you talked about kind of the financial success and the business success, but what was that doing for you internally as you kind of stepped away from what you had grown up with as a child?
Fantastic question. I had a coach. I thought I was hiring her for a business coach, but she was a clarity coach, internal. It was all about identity, right?
Yep.
I didn't know who I was at all, at all. I had no idea who Josh Forti was outside of external accomplishments, right? So the fact that I had high engagement on social media, that's who I was. The fact that I had followers or that I did videos, if I made a post on Instagram and it didn't get a certain number of likes, it was a terrible day. I was like, oh my gosh, people are going to think I don't know what I'm doing. Right? Yeah. No, just complete identity crisis. And, when I was in the house, growing up, we grew up in a very strict discipline. I want to be very clear, because I think I might have misconstrued some things in the past on past interviews. I love my parents. I have an amazing relationship with my parents, right? My parents did an amazing, incredible job raising us the best of their ability. And to this day, I have an immense gratitude towards them and have a great relationship. Also, we were raised very strictly, right? And so when you're raised very strict and you don't have a lot of freedom, right? You don't really know yourself anyway, because it's just rules, right? And then when you get out, then it's oh my gosh, I got to figure this all out. And it was all external identity. And so for me, I only felt good when I was either making money or having followers. And if I wasn't, which was 80% of the time, right? Because that's there's a highlight reel and then there's real life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just didn't like my life. I didn't like who I was, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that I didn't like me. I just knew I wasn't happy. And I was if I just get there, then I will be happy. Because I didn't even know there was this difference between external identity and internal identity and identity in Christ. What the frick does that even mean? Right? I didn't know. And so with that internally, the more success I had, I think when people are oh, it was all null and void and didn't mean anything. I'm no, for me, the more success I had, the more I felt I was worth something. Right. And it only came all crashing down when I realized this was all consuming on my, I would literally 18 hours a day, I'm on my phone. I would go to sleep with the phone in my hand. I would wake up and I'm at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'd make more, I'd go to sleep and I would wake up in the morning and I would go to, it was all the time, 7 days a week. I had no friends, no social life. I just did that. And it was just all the time. And so that feeling of just more all came to a complete, crash down. We had an agency that was probably doing, I think it was $70,000 or $80,000 a month in revenue at the time. And then my brother died in a helicopter crash, my older brother. And he was married at the time, had a 5-year-old son. And she was pregnant, and it's just your world stops real quick. Right. And the whole identity of, I want to be an entrepreneur and have $100 million company and be famous
meant nothing.
And it was just this weird, because you're right. It meant nothing, but also it was but I know it means something because it has, but also it doesn't, but what does? And when I went to my brother's funeral, there was a blizzard the day of, or the day before, all the flights got canceled. He had over 1,500 people register, RSVP for his funeral. Wow. And like 700 people showed up to his funeral. And the things that these people were saying is my older brother. And it was like, he cared about people and he was genuine. And like, you know, he was this person that wanted to make an impact for good. And I was like, if I died today, how many people would actually show up at my funeral? And I don't actually care about that. I care if one person actually cared, like, but like the concept of why they showed up is you show up if you care about that person. That person represented something good, right? And I think when my brother was saved, and you know, so we'll see him again, which is awesome. But that is where that's where God was like, hey, remember me, right? Type of deal. And that really led me down the journey of I sold my company and I traveled around the world with my wife. I mean, I sold everything. We went on a 4-month, well, we didn't make it 4 months. She got sick, but like went around a trip around the world. And like, I didn't think I was running from my problems. Maybe I was, but like to me, I was like trying to process my problems and like, remember money and identity or money and followers were my identity. So I'm still trying to like maintain that. And then we're over in the Philippines and my wife gets sick with an intestinal eating parasite, right? Like so sick, she can't sit up, she's vomiting, she got fever, and we're like a propeller plane to a dirt runway and a 4-hour bus ride we're in the middle of freaking nowhere, right? So like we go to the emergency room and there's a piece of plywood like for the bed. There's ants crawling up the wall. There's no toilet seat on the toilet, right? The doctor walks in flip-flop. Like that's where we're at. And like my wife is so sick, she can't even sit up, right? And I'm like, okay. So it cost me $40,000. I basically drained all my savings account to fly her back home. Emergency flights.
Wow.
She had to have like first class flights because she had to lay down. She couldn't even sit up. Like on the international flights next day, we had prepaid for the whole rest of the 2 months. No refunds on all of that. And I went from 9 months earlier or 10 months earlier making $70,000 or $80,000 a month in revenue, managing millions of followers, to living in the basement of my wife's mom's house over Christmas with $8,000 left in the business bank account. Like, talk about an identity shattering, God trying to get your attention type of moment, type of deal,
I think
right?
he got it.
He got it.
Sure he got it.
Absolutely got it, right? And so I think that was the state that I was in, where I was just like, I just remember, that's when I hired the coach. And I just remember on the first call, I just told her, I said, I don't understand. I don't understand how I can have made people money, a lot of money, how I can get results, how we've done millions of followers, how I had all the things, and I actually used some strong language at the time, but I was like, how did I end up
here,
right? And that's when she was like, you don't know who you are, right? Actually, this is a really powerful part of it. The very first phone call. So I get on a call with her and she's like, I'll help you. I'm $60,000. And I'm like,
you don't have $60,000.
I have 8, right? She's 60. Math ain't mathin', right? But like,
I got $8,000.
Right. But every other coach that I had called at the time was like, I'm going to help you build a funnel, or I'm going to help you launch an offer. I'm going to help you launch. I'm like, that's not what I need help with. Right. And with her, she was like, Josh, I see greatness inside you and you're lost and I can help you. And I'm like, yes. And so she told me 60 grand. I cried my eyes out. I hung up. I called her back 15 minutes later and I said, I have 8. I will put down 5. Can you do a payment plan? Right. And she's like, yep, 5,000 a day. You owe me 5,000 a month for the next 12 months.
Wow.
And I got on the first call and I said, Katie, I will do whatever you tell me to do. I will work harder than anybody else. I will, whatever. Right. And she goes, all right, well, tell me what's going on. And for 45 minutes, I told her all my problems, right? Oh, the business is this, or that, but all these things, right? Like all external factors. Oh, I don't know how to make this. And after about 45 minutes into the call, she goes, are you done? I think so. And she goes, Josh Forti, who are you? And I had no idea what she meant.
And nothing.
Right? Like I was like, what the frick? What did we even talk? What? Right? Like I paid you $60,000 for that.
You weren't expecting that question.
Like what are you talking about? Right? But that was probably the most powerful question that I've ever been asked in my entire life. I'll never forget the moment. Right? Because I mean, I know who Russell Brunson was. I knew who Tom Brady was. I knew who Joe Rogan was. I knew who Elon Musk was. I knew all those people were. I don't know who I was. Right? Mm-hmm. And like that began the process of me going back and refinding out who I was, and ultimately leading me back to Christ several years later. But like, that's where, like, that was the pit. Like that is the bottom of the bottom. I'm out of money. I got to make this work, like type of stuff, where God was like, I'm going to hold you here for as long as it takes,
So how long did it take, just for context for our audience, Because it sounds like things evaporated pretty quickly.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to rebuild? And what was that journey like? Like, what did rebuilding look like for you?
Yeah. That's a really great question. I didn't even know what I was building. And I don't even know when you say rebuild, like what I built that time around was so radically different. Like it's not even the same. It's not even like I was building the same thing anymore. Right. Because now I was building a life based on, who I was. But it took me 4 months of literally working on that. I mean, I met with Katie once a week, but then I talked to her every single day over Voxer. It took me about 4 months of like, this was my entire focus. Nothing else in the world mattered except for figuring out the answer to the question of who am I? It took me about 4 months to be able to answer that question. And then about a month later, so it's been about 3 months or 3.5 months. So 3.5 months, and then a month later, at 4.5 months, I made $100,000 in a day. Just insane, mind bending. It was like, what? How? I don't understand.
How did
right?
this even happen?
Yeah. And so I think there was about a 6 month, but I'm talking like, not like, oh, I journal about this once an hour. Like I'm talking like, dedicate my whole life to like literally just, I mean, I'm doing every exercise, reading book, I'm figuring this out. And so I think it was about 6 months, 6 or 7 months where I felt like I was back to a point where I'm like, okay, I can think about the future now, right? Like I can focus on like getting back to some normalcy. My wife and I moved to Colorado then, and like got away from kind of everything and like kind of back to some form of normalcy, about 6 to 7 months. But even at that point, I acknowledged that God had a plan for my life, but like I had not yet distinguished Jesus, right? Like I didn't understand Jesus's role in my life, and the fact that I'm like, no, I have a relationship with Jesus. Like he's the king. I serve him, right? Everyone's like, oh, you call it God, you call it the universe. I serve God too. I was like, no, you don't. No. I serve Jesus, King Jesus, right? You can have your God, call whatever you want, but like God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, 3 in 1, critical piece of my belief, right? They are the same, but they're separate. I have a relationship with that one. And there's only one religion that claims him, right? And like, that wasn't until 13 months ago, right? What
happened? What happened to get you from God to Jesus?
The fact that after I had gotten to that point where things were kind of back to normal and I had made a little bit of money back and I kind of knew who I was and grounded more, right? I started to like build business back up again. I did things a little bit differently, but I had been so forward facing with everything at this point, right? I was the face of everything. It was all about me.
Yeah.
And then at that point, it started to really shift, right? And it became about, okay, I'm going to learn skills in business because I didn't know, like there was this internal thing that didn't sit right about me being the face of everything. And so even though I knew who I was as a man to myself and to my wife and right, I didn't really know what I was called to do. Like I knew I was called to greatness and big things, but I didn't know where I was called in the business realm. And so I spent, 2 years being kind of, I don't want to say behind the scenes because I wasn't really behind the scenes, but like certainly compared to where I was, a lot more services and things of that nature. And I got to work with very successful people. I mean, like quite successful people, right? That were doing millions and millions of dollars. And I got to do a lot of their marketing and help them with stuff and a lot of my marketing services that I would sell to them. And I would see all of these people claim God. Oh, I want to serve the kingdom. You're like, do you? Right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, but do you? And I remember I got invited to a party one time. We were at an event and there was like this exclusive, it was like super exclusive, like penthouse party and all these 8-figure, people were there. Every big name in the industry basically was in that room. And I walked into the room and I just remember looking around and being like 80 to 90% of these people in this room are completely, and excuse my language, but like completely full of shit. Like they're completely full, like they're lying. Like they claim God or they claim they want one thing, but like behind closed doors, you get a little alcohol in them and I don't drink, but like,
totally different person.
Like not even remotely close. Right. And I was just like, I saw all of a sudden, like it took me back to when I was like young, like all the things that I hated about religious people. Right. I was like, oh, these are the people that they were warning me against about that were like the false teacher, like people that were claiming God but not living it. And I was like, at least the people that I grew up with, at least like they at least tried to live At least they tried to like follow the rules.
Yeah.
Like these people are like just blatantly like there's, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like realizing that there had to be something different, right? Like realizing that there had to be something deeper. I don't know. It just stuck with me. And so I, kept going on that journey, and it was December of 2022. Yeah, because last year, so December of 2022. I was home alone. My wife was out of town, and I was watching. I had like Bethel music, I don't know, something on the background on the TV, and it was in the middle of this like 4-hour long worship session. There was this pastor that gets up on stage, and like all the worship stops, and he preaches this sermon, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, right? And that I'm sitting there, and I listen to this guy, and he gets up there and he goes, "Tonight, I'm going to tell you about Jesus, right? The real Jesus. Like, that's it. Just Jesus." And he delivered this 45, I think it's 47-minute long sermon on Jesus. And he's like, y'all don't understand. Nothing else matters but him. The whole book, it's all about him, right? Like he came down and he knew what it was like to be tired. He knew what it was like to struggle. God, the all king, all powerful, came down to, and he just gives this whole picture of who it was. And like at the beginning, he was like, I'm going to do an altar call. People are going to be saved tonight. And, I've heard that a million times, right? And I'm like, okay, right? Like this. And like he got done with that sermon and he goes, so, like if God's spoken to you, I want to invite you not to religion, not to the church, not to God, not to Jesus, right? I want to invite you to have a personal relationship with him. And like I just fell on my face. Like, I mean, like bawling, right? And like, it was at that moment, like Jesus got a hold of my life. And he was like, I love you. I have plans for you. But like, if you're going to serve me, I need all of it.
All of it.
I need all of it. I don't need 90% of it. I don't need 99% of it. I need 100%. I need all the money. I need all the fame. I need all the desire. I need the success. I need your identity. I need your relationships. I need all of it, 100% of it. And I was like, okay, you have it.
Just like that?
Yes. Because
not even 1 ounce of hesitation or fear.
No, because the message that this person, that this pastor had delivered about who Jesus was, and like the fact that he's the king, like the king of all of it. Like he reigns above everything. He defeated death. Hallelujah. Right? Like defeated it all simultaneously. Like all of wickedness, all the world, all of this for all eternity, simultaneously at the same time, tried to beat Jesus, and he won.
Yeah.
Right? And like he wants a personal relationship with me, and he loves me, and he has good plans for me, and he will walk with me. And like that's who I get to serve, and that's who I get to bow down to. And like in that moment, there's never been a moment in my life where I've been more clear. Like I'm like, I know there's no, like people are like, you don't know Jesus is real. I'm like, yes, I do. Right? And they're like, you can't prove it. And I'm like, I don't need to prove it. I know. Right? Like with no question, without a doubt, like I know. Right? And I know I have a relationship with him. And like that, like when I gave that, like that's when my life changed. And for the first time, I didn't know what it meant. Like it's not like I woke up the next day and was like, I know what to do now. Right? Like, but like for the first time, I felt like I had purpose and I had identity. And like, who is Josh Forti? Like, I'm a child of God, saved by him. I'm loved by Jesus, right? I'm married to my wife, Leah. Now I'm a father, right? I'm powerful. I'm influential. I'm wealthy. I'm free, right? But it's like the very first thing is I'm a child of God, saved by him, serve to Jesus, right? Like that. I serve him. And like Christians, it just sucks because like, I feel like Christians, they go and they see Jesus as like this shepherd boy or something. I don't know. And it's like, yes, he was and is like the person that cares and loves and whatever. Also, he's the king, right? Like also he reigns over everything. And, I think I don't believe in prosperity gospel. I think prosperity gospel is garbage, right? But I very much believe in the concept of what the Bible says, my God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills.
Absolutely.
And my God is abundant. I go, you're worried about like Christians that are broke or that don't, struggle with making money or knowing their worth or value. I'm like, you say and claim to believe in Jesus, the guy that owns a cattle on 1,000 hills that reigns above it all, and you don't think he can help you make 100 grand, right? Like what? Like what? Like what do you, who do you really serve then, right? Because it sounds like you're serving your fears and own doubts, right? And so I mean, that's like my story of back to him. And ever since that point, I mean, I shut down my company immediately afterwards. I mean, it was like so clear. And like my business partner was like, what the frick?
Yeah.
Russell Brunson was even like, sent me a Vox. I saw him at Jordan Peterson, right? And Russell Brunson's like, dude, why'd you shut down your company? Like, why are you big? I'm like, yo, because I got to right now, right? And I took 6 months off. Well, off. I took 6 months and I redid everything. And I figured out who Josh was in Jesus and came back with that, because I want to share that message with him. But I also want Christians, I want people to know that God doesn't want you to be broke. He doesn't want you to be rich. He could care less, quite frankly, about your finances, right? Like, I mean, yes, he cares about you, but like God didn't say go get rich. He didn't also say go be broke, right?
Right.
Like, but also like if you believe in him, he gives you some outlines here, and if you want to go change the world and be free and like, and yeah. So I always say my entire life has been driven by freedom. I just wanted to be free, and I did not find freedom until I found Christ. And the paradox of freedom is that you cannot have freedom without full surrender. Yeah.
Isn't it though?
Crazy.
Isn't it though? Right? You literally had to give up everything
All
to
of
get
it.
to a place where you truly feel free.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you something, because I'm noticing kind of this trend. You seem to be really big in stepping away. Like when you feel that you need clarity or that something doesn't feel like it's working, you take time off or you step away. Why do you think that's important? Because, you know,
that's a good question.
I can imagine that there's so many people listening to us right now that are identifying with points that you've shared, but they feel like I can't shut this down.
Yeah.
I can't step away. All these people are depending on me, this, that, and the other, whatever their story is. Why is it important to step away? And how do people find the strength to do that?
Yeah. It's a really good question. Old identity, Josh, did not step away. Right. There were tragic life moments that caused it, right? Death of my brother. I very much believe, and the Bible talks about this, that God is not a God of chaos. He's a God of clarity, right? He's not a God of confusion. And when there is movement, like that can create chaos, right? It can. Doesn't always have to, right? But I know that when I am unclear, and I know that my life is supposed to be a representation of Christ and of who he has called me to be, and, you know, who I am as a man, as a leader. If I'm not clear, it's very hard to lead, right? And it's really like what's the saying? Muddy water is best left or sit like untouched or whatever to get clear, right? Yeah. Like don't keep muddy in the water, right?
Or something like
yeah,
that.
Something
right?
like that, right? Muddy water is best left to get clear, whatever, right? And it's like I have found that in my life now that like I'm either all in and like we're rolling, right? There's no uncertain, like I know where I'm going, boom. Or it's like, oh yikes, I don't. And like, I don't want to say there's no in between, but it's like, it's very obvious to me when I'm not certain or not clear on where it is that I need to be. And I think that oftentimes we live in these worlds where it's black and white in the sense of like, well, take time off or, you know, take a month off or a week. It's like, I believe that you just need to take the amount of time off that is required to go be silent or to get clear. That's it. And for some people, that might be an hour. For some people, that might be a day. For some people, it might be a week. Some people might be a month. Some people might be a year, right? Like, it scared me to death to shut down my podcast. It scared me to death to shut down my business. Like, never in my whole life would I ever have thought, oh, I'm not going to go and continue to build this. Something that, like, but like, it's the best thing I've ever done because I just was unclear. And so I think that one of the best pieces of advice I got was from a guy named Brad Gibb, very close friend of mine now, very wealthy, successful, religious, 6 kids, right? And he said, Josh, I asked him, he was actually here in this studio. And I asked him, I was like, what advice would you give your younger self? And he said, get married and have a lot of kids. And second is understand that success in life is like decades happen in years and years take decades, right? Like, it's like you will feel like you're doing nothing for 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And then on year 5 or 6, like 10 years will happen in that year, right? And he's like, but it'll only happen if you go through the 3 or 4 or 5 years that are required to go and have that decade happen. And I think oftentimes for me, I just thought life was this. Like if I wasn't going up,
Hmm.
like the fastest way to go up is not straight up or not like this, right? Like the fastest way to go is, like
Yeah,
take
it's all over.
exponential shifts. So I
Yeah.
think if you're struggling to take time off or whatever, go, well, do you need to take time off? Maybe you don't. Maybe you just need to be a little bit more disciplined. Maybe you just need to like put your head down and actually do the work, right? I saw this quote the other day. It was like, I put dear Christians, right? And it was like, sometimes you don't need more prayers. God already gave you the answer. You just need more discipline, right?
Ooh, do
And
what
it's
he
like,
said.
yeah, right. So, but if you feel out of alignment, if you don't know who you are, I think it comes from a lack of integrity, at least for me, a lack of identity, a lack of knowing who I was and where I'm supposed to go. And I couldn't go and I can't continue to go and do the thing that caused me to get out of integrity or caused me to steer from my identity and expect to also fix my identity issue. And like, I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but that would probably be I hate taking time off. I
For
hate
your
it.
advice. Yeah.
But,
Well, I just talked to so many people. They're like, I absolutely cannot do that. Like I
well, that's
literally
BS.
remember a conversation from last week, and they're trying, ironically, I got to record my podcast. I got to do this. I got to do that. Totally could hear the stress and anxiety. And this was a message. This wasn't even a phone call or a voice message. You could literally feel the
Yeah.
anxiety just in how they were responding. But it was clear they just didn't think they could take time away.
Yeah, I would say in that particular case, I know for me, whenever I've been in that scenario, and I've coached a lot of people now and I've seen a lot of similarities, but for me, when I'm in that scenario, two things. Either one, I actually have no idea where I'm going, right? I think I do, but I actually don't. And two, and it's either and or both. Two, I don't know what actually is going to get me there. Like, I don't know what things are because in reality, there's like 2 or 3 things that you got to do anything. If it's more than 2 or 3 steps, it's too many, right? And I think we do 25 or 30 things. And I remember I went to Dan Henry. Do you know Dan Henry?
I actually heard you talk about him earlier today because I was checking out your 2024 goals.
Yeah.
Where you were talking about him, but that was my first time hearing.
Okay, so Dan's great. I mean, he has a crazy story. He's actually Muslim. He is what fascinating, right? But anyway, so I bought his VIP day. Brilliant marketer, made like $50 million, right? I paid him $100,000 to go spend 2 days at his house, and he's like, dude, you think you gotta do all this stuff? Like, he's like, you do 3 things, bro. He's like, if you just do 3 things, you can do anything you want. And I'm like, I gotta do this and this and this. He's like, or just do these 3 things. And I'm like, oh, what about Bubba? He's like, or just do these. I'm like, okay. And then like a month later,
bringing you back,
right? And like when I'm in the 2024 plan, right? It's like I do 4 things this whole year. This whole year, I'm gonna do 4 things. And so I think oftentimes when we're overwhelmed or we're stressed, we don't think we can take time off. It's because I know for me, it's like I felt like I had an iron in 50 different fires, and I was like, I don't know which one's making me money, but I know that if stuff goes bad, at least I'll find something, right? But if I like remove everything and something goes wrong, then I'm screwed, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't trust myself. So you just keep everything in. But if you actually just knew the 2 or 3 things that yielded you 80 to 90% of all your results, you'd be able to quit 80% of what you do. And you mentioned before the show, a lot of people, a lot of the listeners on here and the people with it, they're like, they want to make more money. They want to have more time, right? Like family. I mean, I just had a daughter. My wife just gave birth to our first. So exciting. Like, how do you do all that? And it's like, you got to figure out how to work less and make more, right? Because you can't be doing 80 things. You got to cut 80% out if you want a life, right? And I did not have a life before I figured out how to make money. Like I just didn't, right? Like the right way. And yeah, so I think that if you think that you got to do 50,000 things in order to make money or have any form of success, you're going to stay stuck forever. Yeah.
So I'm curious, Josh, you talked about, we've cycled around this word success a couple of times in the conversation. What does success mean for you now?
If at the end of my life, I can look back and go, I was who God called me to be. And like, quite frankly, and, I think this is one of the things that my dad got right big time, right? Is he always said, and this is very much in alignment with how I believe now, is like at the end of your life, you're going to hear one of 2 phrases. Well done, my good and faithful servant, or depart from me, I never knew you. Right? And like, I want to make sure that I hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. And I don't want to do the bare minimum, right? Like, I want my
wanted
life to be
stay in.
reflective of that, right?
I just barely got in here.
Right. God's like, well done, my good and faithful servant. You met the threshold, right? I love you enough. You just, like, I want my life to be reflective of that. And I believe that I have been given a very special gift and the talents that I've been given and my ability to take criticism and take a stand on things I believe in and stand in the face of controversy, stand up for belief. I mean, I've been in the heat of some very big controversial things where I'm just like, no, this is what I believe, right? And I think that I've been put on this earth to deliver a message, and I know that I'm going to get some heat for that. I know that Satan's going to do everything that he can, but like I just got to make sure that that message is not my message, but it's Christ's message, and that I get to live. So that's, I mean, that's success for me. And then on a daily life, I mean, that looks like, I mean, I want to financially provide. I want to make sure that my marriage, my relationship with my wife, well, Jesus, and then my relationship with my wife and my daughter are first prioritized, while also building a business that allows me to do what I've been called to do. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how you do that. Like, when I have conversations with up and coming leaders, they're like, okay, yeah, conceptually, I know that I need to have time for my own personal spiritual journey. I also saw that you've made some pretty big health commitments with big consequences. So you will be following through. So I need to take care of my personal physical health, my mental health. I need to be there for my family, all these things. How do you manage that on a day-to-day basis so that you can fulfill that definition of success that is so important to you? Like,
I mean,
how do you
I'll tell you this,
what to do and what
I'll tell you
not to do?
the answer, and then but I'm going to give the caveat of there's nothing I can say that's going to help someone on a podcast in a 5-second clip, right? Or this. The reality is most people are not, or they will not do what's required. They won't, right? They just simply, because it's freaking hard, right? It is hard work. Anyone's like, oh, it is hard work. The answer is that I changed my identity to match it. Because my identity, I will follow whatever my identity is. Tony Robbins talks about this. The strongest force in the human personality is the need to stay consistent with how
how we see ourselves. Yes.
Right. So I mean, how I manage that is I actually look at my life and I go, well, okay, if these are the things that I know I need to do, who must I be? What beliefs must I adopt? And how do I remove anything in my life that would prevent me from hitting those goals? And I'm in a very fortunate position right now where I have the financial capability to design every aspect of my life how it needs to be, right? I had to go through hell to get here and like work my butt off. And most people are not willing to go and do that. But like for me, like everything is by design. Like the house that we live in, where it's positioned, like even in like the fact that it's like exactly where I needed to be in relation to the airport. We got this house because there's a guest suite because I knew my in-laws were going to be coming out. They needed a place to stay with the baby is going to be here, right? Like I have the basement here so that I could be at home, but also close enough to like Lifetime to where I can be in the gym every morning with my personal trainer. I hired a personal trainer because I could not do with accountability, right? I hired a coach to teach me how to remove 80%. I mean, I paid Dan Henry $100,000, not to tell me what to do, but basically to tell me what not to do, right? Like all the things to remove, right? And so it's been this very, very intentional of like, you've got to like design it and it sucks. And like, you got to give up a bunch of stuff. But like, also, if you just design a life that's way better than everything that you have to give up, it is not that difficult or that complicated to get it. Right. But like the true answer is like, you got to change how you see yourself. You've got to change your identity and you've got to literally change every single aspect of your life in order to match it if you want to have fast results. Right. And I mean, I learned that from studying Tony Robbins and working with Katie and with Dan. It's like hard work was not enough for me, right? I would try and I would try and I would try and I would try. I mean, I tried to get in the gym for 2 years. For 2 years, I'm going to go in the gym. I told my wife, I'm going to get in the gym. For 2 years, I was a liar. So for 2 years, I had to look at my wife.
You're a liar.
About a year and a half in, my wife goes, okay, bro. Okay, babe.
Whatever.
I'm like, that hurt so bad because I was like, oh my gosh, she
didn't
thinks
believe
I'm lying.
you anymore.
Right. And it was like, okay, cool. What do we need to do? And guess what? We moved. We're like in proximity of it. I got a gym membership. I started going every day. And I couldn't convince myself to go. I wake up, I'm like too tired. So I went and I hired a personal trainer and I was like, here, I'm going to pay you. And he's like, it's this much. I'm like, no, it's this much. I have to pay this much money, right? In order to
make it meaningful to you
every single week. Right. It has to be meaningful to me. You're gonna get there every single week. And if I don't, then you're going to raise the price. Right. Like that. Wow. It was like, I had to literally engineer and design it to where it's like, I'm not that disciplined. I'm really disciplined when it comes to like showing up and going to work.
Yeah.
I love it, but I hate going to the gym. I freaking
No.
hate it. So like, I'm not disciplined there. I'm not disciplined with food. So I have to go and design, like, what would a person that's good at the gym do? Well, he'd probably have a trainer, right? And so like, you've got to shift, and you have to know that, like, for me, I made it a moral issue, right? It was like, I am not morally following Christ. I'm not taking responsibility of my body if I'm not in the gym. And I believe that, like, genuinely for me, I genuinely believe if I'm not in the gym, working out, progressing, I'm not taking care of this body that God gave me. And I serve the King. I will not let the King down, right? Like,
Good.
you know what I'm saying? So it all comes back to that identity piece. And I think that most entrepreneurs probably, and I don't know your audience, right? That well, but like, based on what you've told me about them, most entrepreneurs do not want to build a business, and they shouldn't build a business. Most entrepreneurs, they want to build a life.
Yeah.
And they want to find a skill set and, you know, a business that allows them to go and fuel that life. And if you go read books that are going to teach you how to have 20 or 30% profit margins and build massive teams and systems and complications, like, you're going to build a business and it's going to suck 80 to 90% of your time away from you. Like, listen to the people that have built the biggest businesses. What do they tell you? It takes all your time, all your commitment, all your attention. And I'm like, okay, but there's also people that make $10 million a year and play golf, like, working 30 hours a week.
How did they do that?
Them, right? So how do I become that person? And like, I built a business. I always say, hey, I didn't build a business. I built a money printing machine, right? That's my goal. And now I have the life I want. And now I get to hang out with my wife. And now my wife gets to go get her mani-pedi if she wants, and I don't have to worry about it, right? Not because she needs a mani-pedi, but because that's how I show love to her, to make sure that she's taken care of and like she feels good and all that, right? Those are expensive when you're doing it once a month or whatever, right? And we drive. It's all by design. And now I get to go and focus on what really matters, which is I'm going to go serve the kingdom. But if I'm in scarcity and I'm in lack, if you're I don't want to say I'll die on this hill, because it's like, maybe God's going to change my heart, but I feel very strongly about this right now, is that if you are, particularly if you're an entrepreneur, like, if you're worried about how you're going to pay the bills and like where your next dollar is going to come from, or like money is always at the forefront of your mind, I think it's really difficult to make a large impact for God.
I agree. 100%.
Right? Like, I don't think it's immoral.
Assuming.
I'm like, I'm sorry, like, you're not going to do that big of an impact. But like, or you could just go spend the next 1 or 2 years of your life and just figure out the money thing. Like, once you figure it out once,
figure it out,
you're done. Like, you never got to worry about it ever again. Like, I'm never, ever, ever worried about how I'm going to pay the bills. Because I'm like, if I lost everything, I literally could go make 50 grand next week, like, starting from scratch, because it's in here.
Skills,
right?
Yeah.
It's not an external thing. It's here. It's like, go spend 1 or 2 years to go get free. Make sure you're in alignment with Christ. Like, put him first. Money's not more important, but like, get free. And then go ask Christ, be like, cool. Now what do you want me to do? Right. And I think you can serve the kingdom at a much, much higher level.
I agree 100%. I want to talk about this though, because I know that some people that are going to be listening to this are going to be like, it sounds like you got to prioritize making money for a period of time in order to create this freedom. And in many Christian circles, prioritizing money, even though you just said, hey, it's going to allow me to be able to do this, that, and the other, that whole thought process just creates a lot of anxiety. It creates a lot of, well, is that really honoring God? Like, am I elevating money above him? What do you say to that? Because that's a real thing that people deal with every day.
Every single day.
And here's the deal. They do want to make money. When I talk to
100%.
people and you take them away from all this stuff, they do want to make money, but they're
afraid
to say that they want to make money because they're afraid of how it's going to make them look or how they're going to be perceived. So what do you say to that?
I would say I struggled with that for most of my life. Even though I would tell people I wanted to make money, I had that very same struggle of like, what if I was deathly afraid of making money because I was beat into my head at, a young age that the love of money is the root of all evil and yada, yada, yada. And all. And so I was deathly afraid of it. And I remember when I had that $100,000 day, like, I wasn't expecting that. Right. And so it was like, whoa. And I remember the next coaching call after with Katie, I said, Katie, I have such immense guilt right now. Like, I'm like so much guilt. The fact that I have made this amount of money and like I know people are struggling, and I know like my family doesn't have this money, and like blah blah whatever, and I want to like go buy a new car, like, or I want to go and like invest it, like what? And guilt. And what was so fascinating to me was, I mean, Katie helped me work through how to process that, but like Katie was like, you've got to understand that like you're associating money with something that it's not. And so what I did is I had to go and study. I literally went and studied money, like actually what it was. And it was fascinating that, I mean, probably a year of studying this that it took me before I like learned this, was that like, I actually did not have any understanding of what money really was. I thought money was a dollar, right? But like money, just like currency, money at its simplest form is just the store of value across time and space, right? That's it, right? It's like if it used to be back in the day, it's like apples. If I grew apples and you raised cows, right? And I wanted to like trade, that would work. But if I wanted to trade to this person over there and he didn't want apples, right? So we just all collectively agreed, oh, money, right? And so like when I started to actually understand what money was, I don't believe money's good. I don't believe money's bad. I believe it just is, right? It's just a reflection of value that was created. And so when I shifted my own perspective and belief around what money actually was, the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, not money, right? God has got to be first, right? You can't serve both. But like my inability to make money for so long, my inability to feel so out of integrity with, oh, I'm going to make a lot of money, I'm going to be perceived wrong, 100% deeply, deeply seated in me, right? That stemmed from my lack of understanding of what money really was. And when I went and actually understood and like studied what money was and what it was represented and how it was made ethically, very quickly did I start making exponentially more money, a lot less, like with a lot less effort, because I understood, oh my gosh, my goal is not to actually make money. My goal is to provide value to the world, real value to the world, and exchange that for money, right? Because and so I would, you said, what would I tell those people or what would I say to that? I would say, you're not alone. And it's perfectly normal to feel that way because society has been lying to you and religion has been lying to you. Not God. God hasn't been lying to you. Society has, and the devil has, and right. And I would say that your way out of that is to go learn the truth. Go study what money really is. Go study what God says about money. Go study what, how it's created. Go study how it's exchanged, and you will set yourself free. At least that's what worked for me.
I love it. I love it. As I've been listening to you, you're obviously a very reflective person. You take time to kind of process things and try to figure out what you need to do next. You're a prayerful person. You ask God to order your steps. You're also a person that recognizes, though, that God often works through people. Because I've heard you mention many names through the course of our conversation where you've said, hey, listen, I'm at the end of what I am able to accomplish by myself, and I need help. So talk to us about how you identify that, because you're an achiever. You get things done. So when does that tipping point happen when you say, I need help? And then secondly, how do you figure out who the right person is to help you?
Man, that's a great question. And I honestly don't know if I'm the best person to ask on that. I do feel like God's played a huge role in bringing the right people at the right time. So, I mean, a lot of prayer. I will say one of the things that I've learned is that, like, going back to the complexity issue, is that if you're trying to do a lot of things and you think that you need, when I thought I had to do a lot of things to be successful, I had a really hard time asking for help because I didn't even know where to ask for help. I didn't even know what, right?
Yeah.
And I know for me that when I sat down and got really, really clear on like literally actually where I wanted to go, like I don't even think most people, like I talked to so many people and I asked them where they want to go, and like it's shocking to me how few people actually have a very clear understanding of where they want to go in the next 12 months. Like really clear. But when I actually like sat down and got really clear on that, and I realized that the key was less, now it became a lot easier for me to ask for help because now I didn't need help with 50 things. I needed help with 4. And I'm like, oh, well, if I need help with 4, that one right there, I actually probably know how to do. And then I would just look at them and be like, well, out of all of these things, what's the one where like would like move the lever the most? Like what if like I mastered that, like everything else would move forward. And then like that's just how I identified where I needed help. And then I just literally went, and I don't real method behind this, I guess, but I just went and I was like, who literally has the life that I want? Right. And like, people are like, why'd you hire Dan Henry? He's $100,000. And I'm like,
for like 2 days too, right?
for like 2 days,
like 2
right?
days? Yeah.
2 days in a repitch, right? Like what?
$50 a day, 50,000.
Right? It's like, what? How would, like, what? And I went, because the dude made like $30 million, like without even running a bit. I mean, he ran a business, yes, but like 4 or 5 people on his team, and like just selling info and transformation with like 3 products. And he made like $50 million. And like every other coach over there is like, oh, this and this, all this complicated stuff or whatever. And like Dan Henry's like, hey, I've made $1 million in a day 8 times. You can come to my house for 2 days and hang out, and I'll show you exactly how I did it. And I'll tell you how to do it with your offer. It's $100,000. And like, what I wanted was, I was like, well, my number one focus and priority right now is to get my offer in place around what I want to do. And I'm unclear on that. And so I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I want to do this. I'm a little bit unclear on my offer. He goes, oh, that's perfect. You're that perfect person, because if you're super certain on your offer, it's never right anyway. We got to adjust it anyway. So if you're not really all that clear, I'll help you do it. And I'm like, cool. He's like, are you in? And I'm like, I guess. And he's like, here's a $25,000 invoice for a deposit. Pay it now to show me you're in.
That's it.
I'm like,
wow.
Sitting on the couch on a Wednesday night next to my wife watching The Office. And I'm like, hey, I guess I'm going to hire Dan for like $100,000.
He just told
like,
you that you were.
Right. And she's like, okay. Right. But like, also, like, I had already identified that that's what I needed help with. And then like, he was like, yeah, I can totally get you that. This is perfect. So I just like go and get help from people that have exactly what I want. Yeah, but if I need 50 things, it's really hard to find 50 people and afford 50 people and give your time. It's impossible, actually. Right. So I deeply believe in coaches. I mean, like, so much so. I have probably spent, it was $352,000 before Dan. So $450,000 probably, something like that. Like over $400,000 in coaching, right? On coaches that I've spent. Best money I've ever spent.
Probably made you
millions
of dollars. And not only that, it's improved your health, your physical health, because you had the trainer to help you get in shape physically. Mentally, you would still be in that really dark place, and spiritually, if it wasn't for your coach that helped you get clear on your identity. So, you know, the cost of staying where you were greatly exceeded what you've put out.
More.
I find a lot of times people focus on, well, it's going to cost this, but you know, to invest, right?
Right.
You know, see it as an investment, but you're not thinking about what the return is going to be, because the return, and you're just getting started. Like we talked about, you're like, still young. Like
I'm 29, right?
There's all kinds of runway ahead of you where you'll continue to reap from the investments that you've made.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add to that too is that, like, yes, not only did it make lots of money in this, but like, it also allowed me to design a life that I felt like God was calling me to live, so that I can go out and help others do the same. Right. Like my wife gets my attention. Like every single Friday at 5:00, without fail, at 5:00, like
her time,
it's over. Right. Like work is done and I'm with her, and it's date night. And then Saturday's off, church. And then, right. So it's like, cool, every single time. And I'm home and I like have freedom. And like, when my daughter needs to go to the hospital, like we went to the hospital and it was like, oh, we need to go to this one. And we just went. I didn't know it was out of network. I got a $7,000 bill. I was like, what the frick? Holy crap. But like, I didn't be like, oh my gosh, my life. I was like, okay, whatever. Like, this is super annoying and super frustrating, but like, whatever. Like, and it's like, it gives you the ability, it gave me the ability to like create abundance and to create a life worth living and to go have impact. And like, I was just so afraid of that for so long. I was like, I didn't feel worthy of it. I literally did not feel worthy of having a life of, not without struggle, because that's not it, but like without financial struggle, right? Like, I didn't feel worthy of having a life that allowed me where I could just make a decision. And it was always like, okay, I'm gonna make the decision. Then there's like 37 obstacles that I've got to figure out to overcome it, right? It's like,
right.
I didn't feel worthy of it, but like now I do. And I have a much deeper appreciation for God and who he is and his abundance because of that. And I've lived in nothingness, right? I'm not downplaying that. It sucks. And for those that are in it, like, I'm not being like, oh, you suck. No, I'm like, I feel bad for you. And I'm like, if you're happy there, by all means, then you're the most successful person in the world, right? Like, if you're happy with where you're at, genuinely, you're way more successful than most people, right? But if you're like in a place where you're struggling and it sucks and you feel stress and you feel stuck and you don't know what to do next, like my message to you, like the message I feel right now that I've been called to bring to this world is like, you can be free. Like that, very simply, you can be free. You can be free in Christ. You can be free in your finances. You can be free in your health. You can be free in your relationships. Like you can be free if you surrender and do as required.
Got to surrender first.
Yeah.
So, Josh, what is when all is said and done, you're still young. One of the things that I remind myself often, I'm older than you, but one of the things that I remind myself often is I don't know how much time I have. So I have no time to waste.
Yeah.
Right. So on a daily basis, you've got, these big goals. You've set a goal personally. You want to take, if I heard you right, you want to take home $1 million in 2024, you personally.
Like me personally, not the business, like me
not
personally.
Not the business, but you personally. So you've got this, goal that you want to hit this year, but I also heard purpose, impacting others. How do you balance achieving the goal that you have for yourself personally and the legacy that you want to leave? Or in your view, are those two things intertwined? Like, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah. I mean, I just had a daughter a month ago. So, maybe this isn't the most accurate because I'm like, a lot of my view of life and things
changed, didn't it?
Certainly, it's just, yes, it's changing. It's just like updating, right? It's not like, oh, like I think I got a lot of things right when it comes to like having a kid. I even did a podcast on that. Like I surrounded myself with good people and I prepped myself and like all that. But like just how that's executed on a daily basis, right? Like I think is changing. I think for me, my work and who I am are very intertwined. I think for a lot of people, like there's their personal life and then there's their career.
They compartmentalize it. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, they're very, very closely intertwined, even so much as that like my wife even knows that. And a lot of like what we do and the trips we go on, like we design it around that. And we've designed my business on how to have my wife do what she wants to be able to do with her yoga and her fitness and everything that she's doing. Like my business is very designed in that. And so I think like for me, business, personal life, mission, purpose is very intertwined. I don't think it has to be for everyone, right? I think everyone's going to be a little different. But for me, I don't view my business, for me right now, the business that I'm building right now, I'm not building a business to exit. Like I'm building a business that fuels my mission and my purpose. And like, that's why I have the podcast and that's why I put out content. And that's why I do these interviews. And that's why and so for me, like that $1 million, there's like that $1 million is already spent, right? Like it's already, I just don't say spent, it's already allocated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I knew what you meant.
Right. Like it's not like I'm gonna be like, oh, $1 million, let's go party. Right. Like what? Like, no, it's like, I'm doing $1 million because like there's a significance behind what that will allow me to achieve, who I must become. And then at that level, there'll be a new level of thinking. Right. And so I think that like, you have to have, I mean, especially if you're in a relationship, like you have to make sure that you and your spouse are on the same page and have shared values and are communicating. But like, I think that if you have goals that don't align with where what you feel called to contribute to this life, it's like, well, then why would you have those goals? Right? Like just work in just align them. Right. And so for me on a daily basis, I wake up and I go, who do I got to be today? So I get in the gym first thing, right? It's like, okay, I've got to wake up, I got to be disciplined, I got to brush my teeth. My wife likes me to brush my teeth in the morning, right? Like that's with this. I got to go to the gym, I've got to meet with her and have breakfast and like make sure we're all on the same page. Good, right? Like that, because that's going to contribute to the long-term mission. And then when I get downstairs, I'm like, cool, what's the day's mission or this week's mission? But I know that mission was designed when we did quarterlies, right? For the next 90 days. And that's going to contribute. So like a lot of the stuff is just not predetermined, but it's like it's designed, right? And I think that life is way more fulfilling that way. And that going back to the question, and I don't want to go too much of a tangent here, but like the question of like taking time away, like, right? Taking time to reflect. It's like, what are you doing if you don't know this stuff? Like, if you don't know where you're going and you don't know what you got to do to go and get there, and then you're doing all this, you're just wasting time anyway. You're not going anywhere. You're going to wake up in 5 years and be in the same spot. So just take 6 months off, and you're literally 4.5 years ahead of where you would have been if you didn't. Like, you literally just shaved 4.5. You know what I'm saying?
That's good perspective.
And then I like talk to Jesus every day. Talk to Jesus. Wake up, talk to Jesus, right? Like, get wisdom from Jesus. And I don't know, it's weird. He talks to you in weird ways, and
that's true.
Life is never bad if you just talk to Jesus. Right.
Yeah, I hear so much through our conversation about that true relationship with Jesus, not that quick prayer, bless my day, but a true relationship with Jesus, being clear on your identity and designing. You've used that word a lot, designing your life. So those are definitely some nuggets.
Because God, you are literally a creator. And like people are like, oh, but God has purpose for your life. I'm like, okay, ready? In the Bible, what is the very first thing that we learn about God? Very first thing, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God
created.
So the very first thing we learn about God is that he is a creator, right? And then the Bible says we are made in the image of God.
Yeah.
Right? So like God gave us choice and agency. He gave us the ability to create, to design, to build, right? So like he didn't just put you on this earth and then like have fun. There's a purpose. But like also he gave you agency and choice to go design it. So it's like, get my purpose from God. Cool. This is my purpose. This is where I'm going. Now I'm going to design what that looks like. I've got choice. God gives me the mission. I'm going to go design the plan. Like, let's go. Right? And I just think that if Christians just woke up every day and were pumped about the fact that like they get to serve Jesus and their mission, and they're like, every time that they were sad about something or like, oh, I'm struggling here or whatever, they go, cool. God gave me agency and choice to go and fix it. God, what do you want me to do here? Cool. Let me design a plan and then go. And they just woke up like that. Like, yo, Christians would be awesome. But most Christians suck. And they're just judgmental people that like, and like, I love Christians. Like I literally, I love my church. I go to church. I mean, we're in church. We're active. Like I'm one of us. All right. But like, just so often, I think we just sit around and we go, well, God will take care of it. It's like, no, you idiot. Like, no. That's why God made us. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I like to say, Josh, is that there are some things that only God can do. And there's some things that only we can do. And I think we miss that sometimes, right? Like God's not going to come down here and make us work on our business for us. You know, he's not going to do those things. We have to make the decision that you like you said, and we have to follow through. So there's certainly things that we have to lean on God for. But sometimes you're right. Like you can abdicate responsibility because you're still praying about something, as we talked about earlier, that you already have the answer to. So taking action is critically important.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your team, because we talked about a little bit earlier that, you want to design your life. And so a big business with tons of staff and all that, that's not your vision. But I'm guessing that you're not doing it alone 100% either. So how did you decide, what your team was going to look like? And can you give us a little perspective on what that looks like? Is it like 5 people or 10 people? Like, how do you make things work through other people?
That's a great question. So right now it's me and an assistant as who actually are in the business day to day. But then we have I have a lot of trusted contacts, and like, I don't even call them contractors. They're like trusted partners and people that do the projects for me. Right. So we do plan on bringing on plan on bringing 2 more people on this year. So there'll be probably 4 of us by the end of the year. But the way that I like to look at it is I like paying people for their expertise. Right. And so like I have a dedicated funnel builder. I don't build funnels. Like I just pay him. I have a deal with him. And then any of my clients that come, they're like, do you have a funnel builder? Oh yeah, this. So I have a partner there. I have a lady, Kristen, who does all our email stuff, right? Anything email, tech, anything. She's amazing. Well, okay. She has a program where if you pay her $7,500, like you basically just get access to her and her team to come in and like go in. They'll set up all the email stuff once. And then they're like, if you ever have any questions or anything, we'll just come in there and just do it. And I'm like, amazing, for like a year or something like that. Right. So it's like, cool. I pay her. And so like I have these trusted people that like they play a big role. They know quite a bit about my business, and I make sure I pay them in accordance with that. right?
Yeah.
Like I want to pay a premium for someone to have a little bit more attention on my business, even though I could get it cheaper elsewhere. Graphic designer, same thing.
Absolutely.
So my thing is that I've done a terrible at building teams in the past. Do not come to me for team advice, right? For hiring people, whatever. I don't know what I'm doing, right?
Okay.
But I will say, my assistant now, oh my freaking goodness, she has changed my life in every single
Yeah.
capacity because she was the right person, and I was hiring the wrong person before.
That's
And
good.
so by getting a coach and being like, who do I need to hire? And they're like, hire this type of person. And I'm like, why? And they're like, just do it. And then I hired. I'm like, oh my gosh, it works so
It
well,
just worked,
right?
right?
So I'm a big believer in that. And I think that at the beginning, typically speaking, it gives you a lot more freedom because I don't have to manage my email person. I just tell, like, she knows what she's doing, right? I don't have to manage my funnel person. I don't have to manage, you know what I mean? The graphics person.
Yeah.
And so I have me and then my assistant, and my assistant knows, I mean, my assistant, I probably could ruin my life, honestly. Like she has access to so much, but like very
She has
trusted, and
access to
she's the one that
everything.
communicates on all those. Yeah, who, not how type of stuff. We'll be at probably 4 people by the end of the year though.
No, that's really helpful though, because a lot of the people that I talk to are still doing everything themselves.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Trusted, contacts and partners that help make all of this work. But a lot of people are trying to figure out, like, what is that first person that I hire?
I will.
And
I
it's
that
gonna
I
be
can
like,
tell you.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Like if you want freedom in your life, the very first thing that you have to figure out before you even hire anyone else, the very first thing that you have to hire or figure out is you have to figure out what your offer is. And like you have to have one. How many?
One.
How many?
One.
Not 2, not 3, not 5. You have to have one offer that if that is the main thing of what you do. And if all you do is sell that offer, like you could fund, like you're good. Like you're taken care of. You made your money. Like if you sell coaching or service, I mean, it's gotta be like $5,000 or $10,000. Like not like this $200 thing or whatever. No, like figure out an offer that is going to run your business, right?
The high ticket person. Yes.
With margin, with profit, right? Like something that is like, if you sell it, you're going to be able to keep 50% of it, right? Or 60 or 70% of it, right? Transformational. Yep. Then the very first hire should be delegating all of your tasks that are low dollar tasks to an assistant. Now, some people are like, oh, you should hire a salesperson first or whatever. I tried doing that. The problem with is that then you're still doing low dollar tasks, right? Good. So like a good assistant fundamentally changed my life. I mean, like absolutely. And I started her by going, I need you for 10 hours a week. And I need your full-time attention during those 10 hours of like I need you to know that you're going to get the task done. And I've delegated those off to her. And I was like, if you do a good job, I'll raise your, like we'll do a 30-day or 90-day intro period or whatever. Right?
Yep, absolutely.
Finding that to where like, if you can't tell your assistant to do something one time and she does it or he does it, not a good assistant. One time, right? Like there's that trust, whole life will change. Then figure out the rest of it. But you can't hire the assistant if you're barely making any money.
That's right.
Right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Now, I was actually going to go there next because I'm thinking back actually to a conversation where, the person's business was growing and they were excited to tell me, hey, this and that and the other has happened. I'm partnering with this and that. And I've brought on some people, but I'm not making money. And so it pointed to what you shared is you've got to have the right offer so that there's enough profit margin in it so that you can, I love what you said, pay people, for the value that they create, right? Because
pay people good money. Yeah.
You got to pay people good money. So it's a great point is before you talk about who you're going to hire, you got to make sure that you have the offer right first.
Yeah. Otherwise you're going to have to get rid of them because you won't be able to afford to pay them. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about that a little bit. Some of the people in our audience are Christian entrepreneurs, and some of them are bivocational. So they're in ministry and maybe they're coaching or speaking, and they earn an income from that as well. Yep. So sometimes it's, I do speaking engagements. I have my own podcast. I do these coaching programs, but I also serve in some capacity in ministry. Yep. And sometimes one of the tensions that exists is, well, gosh, I've got this ministry. and I've got this entrepreneurial side, and I've
Yeah.
got this business. How do I manage that, juggle that? Any advice from you? Because now I'm trying to have this offer, but I'm also a minister, and there's this conflict that often comes up.
Conflict in charging a lot of money with it, or conflict
Yes,
in
absolutely.
Yeah.
Conflict and charging a lot of money. And then I would also say, Josh, sometimes it's, well, I don't want to talk about this offer in this space because these people see me as a minister, and it's not right for me to talk about an offer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects of that, multiple different things that you asked there. Specifically with the offer thing, though, I mean, once again, focus on fixing your mindset on money if you think there's a conflict of interest. Also, just because you make money doesn't mean you have to flash money, right? Like, you can be a quiet, wealthy person, right? You can live very frugally, and, you know what I mean? Like, so, that I will say this. I have my way of doing things. There are a million different ways to skin a cat, right? Everything works if you work, right? So take this advice through the lens of what you've known about me through this podcast so far, and knowing that, like, I optimize for one thing, which is, like, I optimize for profit because I want to be able to go and work with less people more directly and really focus on, like, transforming their life rather than trying to work with lots of people. I want to have a life outside of business. You want to do ministry? I want to have a life, right? And be involved in the church and all that stuff too, right? So what I focus on is I actually have to find a problem. Like, Dan Henry taught me this a long time ago, but we reviewed it when we were down in his house in Costa Rica, right? He was like, dude, you want to know how easy it is to make money? Like, it is literally the simplest thing in the whole entire world to make money. It's so freaking simple. You want to know how simple it is? Like, sure. He goes, you find a problem that people have. You find a solution for that problem, and you sell them that solution. That's it. That's how you make money, right? And he's like, you could do that at the dollar level, or the $10 level, or $1,000 level, or the $10,000 level, or the $100,000 level, or the $1 million level, right? Yeah. And so the first question I look at is, I go, I just need to find a problem that is solvable, like that I solved, that's actually worth charging what I need to get paid to do it. That's actually worth my time. Right? Otherwise, it's like, why are you doing it? Like, if it's just gonna be a struggle, you're not gonna be able to scale it. Like, you're just spinning in circles, right? Like, you're like, I want to do this, but it's not making any money. You're like, charge more. Well, I can't. Well, then why are you doing it? Well, it's like, right? Like, just stop. So, one problem, one outcome, one offer. And I mean, Alex Hormozi, solve the problems of the wealthy, and they will make you one of them, right? The concept behind that is like, you're gonna get paid directly in the direct proportion, not to the problem that you solve, but to whose problem you solve, right? Like, if you're dealing with a broke person, like, you're probably not going to make that much money, right? And that's fine. You can serve broke people, but also if you're trying to create freedom, like, maybe serve someone that has the financial capability, right? Not be rich, but just like someone that can afford it. So my thing is I'm like, I talk to a lot of coaches, a lot of speakers. I talked to one yesterday and one this morning that are speakers, and they put out content, they do speaking, and they do coaching, and they do all this stuff. They're not making any money. They're like, I just don't even know where I've got all this experience. How's it? I'm not working. I'm like, because you're literally, nobody knows what you actually do. You have no clear problem that you solve. There's no clear, if I give you money, I have no idea what the outcome is, right? I'm like, you're doing too many things. It's like, well, I could do all of these 50 of these things. And I'm like, and I do one. I'm gonna make $1 million, right? And so I'm like, just pick one. Like, give everything else away for free, and then pick the one thing that you're going to charge for, and build the best possible offer with the best possible program, and figure out how to sell that. And my final thought on like that is, Dan Henry looked at me and he said, or when we were down there, and I said, how do you figure out if you're going to charge like $5,000 versus 25, 100 grand? Like, what's the difference of those offers? And he said, the higher the price of the offer, the less stuff should be included. And I'm like, wait, hold on.
Wow.
Like, that's backwards.
Yeah.
Like, that's
You
backwards,
got to break
Dan.
that down. Break it
Right?
down.
And he's like, I'm like, you mean the more? He's like, no, the less. I'm like, why? And he goes, because people that pay more are paying for certainty, not stuff. Right? If you give someone, like, if I told you I'm going to help you make 100 grand, and all you had to do was watch 75 videos and 13 worksheets and 12 different, steps, how excited are you?
Super.
But if I told you I was going to make 100 grand, help you make 100 grand, you got to watch 3 videos, like 3 boot camps that I do, learn 1 skill, and send out Google Docs. It's way easier, right? Less things. I can charge 10 grand or 25 grand for that versus the $97 membership area with all these videos in it, right?
That's good.
At 100 grand, I paid Dan Henry 100 grand. Do you think I got a membership login?
I'm quite certain that you didn't.
No, I got 2 days at his house.
Right? Yeah.
Right?
Conversation.
Like what? Like, how is that? Oh, because that is valuable to me because I'm going to be able to expect. So anyone that's out there, like figuring out their offer or figuring out whatever, I have helped my clients sell a lot of things, right? And make a lot of money online. And yet I always tell people I don't sell anything. I never sell. All I do is solve problems. And when you solve somebody's problem and you show them how you can solve it, and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, that's the problem I have, and that's the outcome that I want. As long as that outcome is worth whatever you want to charge, they will pay it every single time. Like every single time. Because they have the problem they want to solve. So my advice with offers is always that. What problem do you solve? What outcome do you get them? And make sure that that outcome includes few things as possible to get there. Just make sure that that outcome is worth more than whatever it is that you charge. That's it. Right. We sell $25,000 offers that way.
It's an exchange, right?
Yeah.
Money in exchange. So people are willing to pay you more because, even just hearing you provide those 2 different examples, right? The feeling of overwhelm with the 75 different things, the worksheets, makes you want to run from it, right? It repels you. But when you know,
100%.
hey, I've got to focus on these things, and this person is going to guide me through the journey, kind of like you talked about earlier, you're looking for someone who's already exemplifying the life that you want. And so that also creates a degree of certainty. So it's like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. I can do this.
100%. And like as short as path, as simple as path as possible. Like I am quite confident, quite certain that like any entrepreneur, coach, consultant, service provider, whatever in the online space, like I pretty much guarantee as long as you have some form of skill set that I could put together an offer and make you $10,000 in probably 7 days, honestly. I mean, for sure a month. I mean, that's like so long as ridiculous, like within a week, right? But like, would you rather have me film an entire course on that and give it to you for $500? That's 40 videos. Or would you rather just pay me $5,000 to come to my house for the day? And you're like, oh, well, if you're going to sell it in a week, you're literally going to make 10 grand.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why wouldn't you just pay me the $5,000 to come to my house for a day? Why waste your time? Right?
Sure.
And like, that's what I'm saying. It's like, just shorten the process, be more certain, do the outcome. And then like, understand that that's so valuable to people. People want to pay that.
Amen.
Amen. But society has lied to you and told you that if you charge lots of money, you're evil and going to hell.
Yes, exactly. But I love the way we're reframing the conversation. And I want to add one other piece to it. What you talked about earlier, that it's not just $1 million, it's what the $1 million allows you to do and like what it represents. Yeah. So what are some of the things that making more money has allowed you to do outside of lifestyle things? Like how has it allowed you to be able to contribute positively to church causes?
I'm very sure. I mean, we give a lot, and we like to be very hospitable. I guess that might be one topic where I'm like, I don't know if I want to go into details about the whole details of where we give.
Well, you don't have to go into details.
But I think
something to inspire someone to say, hey, this can actually allow me to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do before.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the first thing that it allowed me to do was break away from allowed me to be independent and not relying on anyone else, and allowed me to like move away and like get my own health right and my head right and my relationship right. Like the ability to move away from a toxic environment, the ability to move away and like not need to, like nobody pays my healthcare bill. Nobody pays my phone bill. Like I'm not reliant on somebody else. Like if an emergency comes up, right? So I think first and foremost, like giving you and your spouse, your family, financial security is a very, very, very important thing, right? Like my wife is never worried about, oh my gosh, we're going to be able to pay the bills. And like that allows her to be a really good mom. Right. And right. So I think first and foremost, like, I think that if you remove your own burden from society before you try to go contribute to others, right? Right. That. And then after that happened, the ability to be hospitable with very specific causes that we care about. So there's certain organizations that have played a massive role in my life that we donate to on a very consistent basis. Obviously, tithing every week to our church. Our church just did a big fundraiser they're buying a SWAT van, and they're paying to have 3 brothels shut down, like saving, girls and women from sex trafficking. Right. And like that costs money. And so we were able to like donate to that. being very hospitable with gifts and with travel. I mean, like one of the best things that I can do, like if you give a broke person or a broken mindset person a bunch of money, they're just going to blow it. Right. But like
Sure.
for like one of the things that like I know is very important to my mom and to my family is like them being able to come visit or us visiting them. Like same thing with my wife. Right. So like being able to go and like make sure that like family time is happening, even though we're, farther away, donating and like providing financially, like education. Like we sponsor kids, but also like sponsor people to go to like different events, like that are in the entrepreneurship space, right? Like we like to do that. So like a lot of things that are not like, oh, look at what we did, but rather like we see a specific cause, right?
Yeah.
I really like filling up people's tanks with gas, right?
Mm,
Like randomly walking up and
that's
being like,
cool.
it's like 40 or $50, but like, 40 or $50 is a lot to some people,
That's
especially if you're doing it on a, somewhat consistent basis. So just being in that mode of abundance and being able to be very like generous to those around us. And then also like, I think the biggest way with money, directly is like to donate into the charitable organizations that we like for Christ, right? That we do and in the church. But I would say like, even more so than that for us, it's like, it allows us to take time off and like be involved in the church, or like allow time to like go and like pour into a Bible study. Like I open up my house, we run a men's Bible study, right? And it's like, well, we need a place to meet. And like, guess who has a big house with lots of room where everybody can come congregate at, right? Boom.
Mm.
When anybody's ever traveling through, they need a place to stay. Guess who's got a guest suite, right? Like come. And so it's just like being very generous and hospitable with your life, not only with just the amount of money that you're giving to other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. That was perfect. You helped to give some very tangible examples, things that people can wrap their minds around.
Yeah.
That having the abundance, the overflow allows you to be able to do. Like to your point earlier, if you're still trying to figure out how you're going to cover your basic expenses, you're not able to do any of that. So I would argue, like to your point, money is not good or bad.
Not good or bad.
Broke or rich, it's not of consequence. It doesn't determine your worth as a person.
Or where you're spending eternity. Yeah.
Or where you're spending eternity.
Nope,
I do believe though that when you have abundance, you are able to give generously. It will come down to where your heart is financially. You'll be able to give generously and create opportunities for other people, not just for yourself. You'll be able to create opportunities for others that you wouldn't have been able to create without having that abundance.
And like, I would go one step further than that as well and say, now that I'm understanding your question a little better, do most of your audience live in America / a first world country?
Yep, most.
Okay. You have been given the ability to live at the most prosperous time in the history of the world, the most abundant time where more money and opportunity has existed more than any other time in history. And given the ability to access almost all of it through your phone or through your computer. And if you choose to stay in poverty or struggle with the money conversation, like very clearly, like we said, does not determine your spirituality, doesn't determine where you're going, it doesn't determine your worth. I do think that it does say, especially if you're a man or a breadwinning woman, right? Someone who like that is their, responsibility to provide. I do think it says a lot about you as a person to say, God has given me all of these opportunities to go and get educated and then not take advantage of that and to be needy of other things and to live in scarcity. And I know for me that when I studied money, like people are like, money can draw you away from God. I'm like, yeah, if you let it, if you make money the focus. But the more I studied money and the more I understood and made it, and the more I provided value to the world and led and built a business, the more I understood God, because the more I understood his structure of like when he was talking about leadership or when he was talking about family or men being providers or like I started to understand like those things. And then I was like, oh, when God talks about money being an idol, I'm like, oh, I see how people are doing it there. So like, and so like for me, it put me in this state of abundance, right? Like, and God is a God of abundance, right? One of the first sins, probably the first sin of the Bible was the sin of lack, right? Focusing on what they didn't have, right? And so it's like you stay in this state of being like, if I'm constantly expanding and I'm growing, someone asked me the other day, they're like, when's enough for you? And I'm like, what do you mean when's enough? I have plenty. It's not about enough, right? It's about like who am I? Like, I'm producing. I've been called to produce and to grow and to provide and to create abundance. Like, the world needs that. And so I think that you are, I mean, deeply, there are exceptions, obviously, but I have a deep belief that if you live in America, you live in, you know, this day and age, for most people, if you choose to stay in poverty or choose to stay where money are blocked, you're squandering the opportunities and resources that God have given you. Obviously, there are exceptions, clearly, but as a general rule, like I do believe that.
I agree with you 100%. And I think that's definitely a mic drop moment. I could think back to a conversation recently where we were talking about, because I know marketing is also a passion of yours. Like it's harder in some ways, right? Because there's so much noise and everyone can do it, but it's also easier than it's ever been, because you can, just like you just said, you can literally take your phone and you can speak to an audience like that. Whereas before, you know, all the things that you had to do, you had to get a direct mail piece out, you had to take an ad in a newspaper, you got to try to figure out how you're going to get something on TV. You can have your own podcast, which I know that you're passionate about as well. Like, you've got all these tools at your disposal, readily at your disposal, many of them for nominal cost, if any. Huge opportunity.
Huge. And if you focus on just trying to go get money, you're not going to have any, right? But if you focus on what's required to go make money, you realize, oh, I got to provide value to the world. So like, you're going to solve problems, and you're going to make people's lives better, and you're going to have access, the ability to impact other people's lives and interact with one another, right? I always joke that I live in a bubble, right? Because I'm like, I never have to leave my house, and I only have to talk to the people I want to talk to. But like, guess what? Like, I am awesome. Like the clientele that I'm working with, like, they are very real people, right? And like, we're helping literally change their lives and help them really change where they're at and how they see the world and who they're able to serve and how they're able to provide. And like, those are real people, and those lives are notably better because they're working with us, right? And we get letters, and I get thank yous, and I have people telling me like, thank you for changing. And I'm like, if I wouldn't have charged them $25,000 for it, they wouldn't have done it. Like, I've given so much information away for free. And in my whole history of ever giving information away for free, it's like, I think 2 people that have ever sat down with one-on-one have ever done anything with it out of the probably 100 people that I've done it with, right? Get them to pay. So I believe that when you have this opportunity, it's hard if you make it hard, right? But if you stick with something and you commit to something, like, I believe, I guess my final thought on all this would be like, you have been put on this earth to be who God has called you to be. You have a mission, you have a reason. And it's like, if you were playing a video game, right? There's a mission, there's a reason that video game exists, right? But there's lots of different resources and things you might find and go and do and have to like use to go accomplish your mission, right? And like, God put you on this earth for a reason, and he was like, hey, I've called you to do this. Maybe you don't know your long-term vision, right? I don't know. I wish I did. I have my couple year, but I don't know what God's called me to do for the rest of my life. I wish. It'd be amazing. But I know who God's called me to be right now. And like, we live in a society where money's important and money provides economic value, right? And it's like, you have these resources. And if you want to be a powerful person, if you want to be who God's called you to be, if you want to serve him, God is like, I put you alive in the most prosperous time ever and gave you access to all the information. Go use it for good, right? You get to define what that is, you and God. That's up to you and him. But like, go figure it out, because you can be free. Like, and the best way to go and like impact the lives of other people is to be a living, breathing example of what is possible because of who you are, right? Like, I've inspired much more people based on who I've become and what they've seen from me than I have with my education of telling them what to do. And that would be my final thought or advice on that of, you know, I love everyone because Jesus tells me to love everyone, right? And, you know, I wrestle with that, obviously, but like, I love everyone and I'm empathetic to each person's situation. At the same time, I want them to know deeply, no matter where you're at right now, no matter what you're going through, what you're struggling with, like, you can create freedom in your life. Like, you can, if you're willing to surrender and do the work.